Congressman Garamendi, President Biden calling Russia's latest action the beginning of a Russian invasion of Ukraine. Why is there reason to agree with that?
Because it's actually happening. When Russia indicated, when Putin indicated that he was going to declare that those two eastern provinces of Ukraine were independent, that then set in motion the invasion. Actually, the invasion occurred 7 years ago when Russia took over Crimea and then annexed Crimea, and then also in the eastern region, the Donbass region, the little green soldiers came in. That war has been going on for 7 years. Some 15,000 people have been killed in that war. So this is not new, but this is a new stage in that war in which Russia has overtly inserted itself into the political, that is the declaration that these two Ukrainian provinces are independent, which of course they are not, and also authorizing the deployment of Russian military into those two provinces. There is clear evidence that that is already happening and actually has been happening for the last 7 years. Unofficially, as far as Russia was concerned, but for those of us on the West, we know that was Russia. So yes, this is a very, very important movement in the process here. It's clear indication that the Russian bear has decided it would take those two provinces as an appetizer and then consume the rest of Ukraine in the very, very near future. And certainly, given the troops that are surrounding the entire country of Ukraine, they could do it, but not without a considerable pushback by the Ukrainian people.
So in terms of response, how aligned are you with the increased sanctions the president announced this morning against Russia?
Yeah. Well, certainly the delegation from the Congress of the United States that is here to meet with the other parliamentarians from the NATO countries, 30 different parliaments, including our own, here at this meeting in Brussels. It is a remarkable shift in the last 3 years to see a disarray amongst all of these parliamentarians about what to do and how to get things done. In fact, nothing was getting done. But in the last year, once that Trump was gone and all the trouble that he caused for the NATO countries and for NATO itself, we pulled together. There was unanimity. There was very clear solidarity and determination and willingness to take very, very strong steps, which these NATO countries know will have an effect on their economy. Simultaneously, the European Union has been meeting, and you talk about a group that can't get together. Well, that would be the European Union. However, this evening, the European Union did get together and universally laid out additional sanctions that are very strong sanctions and more to follow. And so Western Europe, the European Union, and the NATO countries are unified. That was why we came here to see what we could do to help. I think we did. But more importantly, Putin has unified Western Europe in a way that most people thought could not happen.
What if the sanctions don't work? Putin doesn't stop?
Well, that's always a possibility, but there are going to be more sanctions. The president just announced sanctions on individuals. Earlier, he had announced sanctions on activities in those two eastern provinces that Russia thinks are independent. The new sanctions that the president announced just moments ago are very heavy. They are targeted to individuals, and they are but one step along a path. Now, when Congress returns next Monday, I would expect to see on the floor, probably just hours ahead of the State of the Union, the House of Representatives passing a very strong and very extensive list of sanctions that have never been imposed anywhere in the world, but are certainly going to be made available to the president should Russia do that invasion of all of Ukraine that you just talked about. We are also making sure that Ukraine has the defensive weapons that it needs, and we continue to send into Ukraine defensive armaments to address the tanks that Russia will surely use, the Javelin missiles, anti-air missiles of various kinds, and other armaments are all being directed into Ukraine. And also the NATO countries are also assisting in that process. The United States is also making it very clear to Putin that you're not going to touch NATO countries. We are increasing the deployment of America and NATO troops on the Eastern Front. That would be the Baltic states of Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia, as well as Poland, Romania, and Bulgaria. All of that is happening as we speak. And so that's another clear message to Russia that, hey, you've demanded that NATO withdraw back to the 1997 situation. That's not happening, Mr. Putin. In fact, the opposite is happening. So back down. Take your Russian bear and go home.
So you're there in Belgium, the meetings with NATO officials. How strong are opinions there that Putin isn't going to stop? He's going to take all of Ukraine and then possibly more.
Varying opinions, but most everybody's aware of the intelligence that the United States and other NATO countries have developed that indicate clearly that Putin is in a position to invade Ukraine from three different sides: from the east, from the north, that is from Belarus, directly into Kyiv, which is probably less than 150 miles away from that buildup in Belarus, and also from the Black Sea. All of that is poised, ready to go. Will Putin do it? Many of us believe that he is prepared to do it. He's now getting a very serious message from a unified NATO and a unified European Union, all of those countries, more than 30 countries, pushing back and saying, don't do this. Otherwise, your country, Russia, is going to be seriously economically damaged. And perhaps even more important to you and your oligarch friends, Mr. Putin, you and they will be cut off from the world. We're already imposing sanctions on individuals, tying up their money, stopping their bank accounts. What I would love to see is when their jets land anywhere in Western Europe or the Western Hemisphere, that jet be confiscated. This has got to be made personal because Russia operates on the personal level. It's Putin and his cronies that run that country. Now, with regard to Ukraine, Ukraine has been an independent country since 1991. They actually had a referendum in 1991. Do they want to stay with Russia after the collapse of the Soviet Union, or do they want to be an independent? They voted overwhelmingly to be independent, and they have been independent since 1991. Different governments, some of those governments favoring Russia, some favoring the West. The current president, Mr. Zelensky, was elected in a free and fair election 3 years ago. And he has been very, very clear that Ukraine is an independent country, that they intend to fight for their independence, that they are going to rally the people, which you have seen perhaps on various television screens. And my understanding is that either tonight or tomorrow morning, he will call up the reserves in anticipation and perhaps to give Mr. Putin one more reason not to invade Ukraine. And so we need to understand that Ukraine has decided to be a Western leading country. They have a democracy. They have a vibrant society. They have a vibrant economy that's growing. They are dealing with past corruption. They want to be joining the European Union. They've also wanted to join NATO, although that's not likely to happen anytime soon. So it's about freedom. It's about the world order in which countries are not going to be invaded by their neighbors, setting off a world war, where countries are going to make their own determination about their future. And if we back away from this one and allow Mr. Putin to do this, I can assure you that he's going to test NATO in a way that would be extraordinarily dangerous. Because I know that about 40% of the population in Latvia is Russia. And Russia has toyed with that country and the Baltics for a long time. And that's why the United States is now sending additional troops to those three Baltic countries to tell Russia a message: don't mess here.
Well, you are on the Armed Services Committee there in Congress. At what point do you think that the U.S. would increase the involvement from supporting them with military weaponry and actually send in troops?
Not going to happen. The United States is not going to send troops into Ukraine for any reason. First of all, it would require a vote of Congress. That would literally be an authorization to go to war, what we now call an authorization to use force. Not going to happen. Congress will not do that. And the president isn't going to ask for it and has very clearly said he will not do that. But we will do everything we can, short of that, to provide Ukraine with the wherewithal that it needs to sustain an attack. And it's not just military weapons, it's also financial. Biden has already authorized $1 billion loan guarantee so that Ukraine can borrow money with our guarantee behind it to finance the ongoing operations of government and the ongoing operations of preparing for war. So we're doing that, and we're not alone. The European Union is doing it, as well as other NATO countries individually. And so Ukraine knows, and President Zelensky just said an hour or so ago that he appreciates and understands how important the commitment that is now in place, both financially, militarily, that is armaments, not military soldiers, but armaments, and also the sanctions that are now being levied against Russia. More to come. More to come. Keep in mind that what is now happening with regard to sanctions is the first of many future steps that will be taken, each one more damaging to Russia, the Russian oligarchs, the Russian leaders, Putin and others, military. We will undoubtedly find ourselves cutting off all supplies that Russia needs to sustain and to rebuild its armaments. Their supply chain is very tenuous. It depends upon the West for most of the materials that they need to sustain their military.
Congressman Garamendi, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.